The Path to Authenticity is brought to you by GIA Miami. Founded by world-class mental health experts, GIA provides advanced care for difficult-to-treat conditions, including anxiety, medication-resistant depression, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Using state-of-the-art methods, GIA can help people recover from conditions when more traditional approaches can't. Dr. Antonello Bonci has assembled an expert team serving international clientele in a modern and resplendent Miami setting. If you or someone you love is suffering from depression, anxiety, OCD, or other mental health concerns, call GIA at 833-713-0828. You can learn more about GIA by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting giamiami.com.
Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
I'm Antonello Bonci, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
If this is your first time here, thanks for checking it out. If not, thanks for coming back. I'm Tom Gentry, and this is The Path to Authenticity. Episode 211 for Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2023. First of all, I want to say this episode is with Dr. Antonello Bonci. Used it back in episode 167. He's with GIA Miami, which has been the show's sponsor for the last year. I just wanted to share this again to thank them. For a guy like me who just has this little podcast, to have a sponsor support the show for a year like this, paid me up front for a year of ads on this podcast. It's such a big deal to me. It made an enormous difference in my life. And I just want to thank them. It's just one of many remarkable things in my mind that have happened to me in association with this podcast. The quality of my life has been enhanced enormously. And for example, one thing I want to share is that, this has been about my own path to personal authenticity as much as anything else. Creating this podcast, carrying out this vision has been about my own path to authenticity. And it's just been great. It's given me reasons to talk to people I never met, and helped me create so many friendships, given me confidence that I never had before and really couldn't imagine having. And, about a year and a half ago, I was on this social media app, Clubhouse, who, if you've listened to the show, you've heard me talk about this quite a bit. It's an audio drop-in, audio-only social media app. And I do a lot of the interviews on that platform. And I was messing around on that app one day and I met someone. And she specifically wanted to talk to me about the podcast because she read my profile, saw that I was doing it, liked the name. She's super cute. And so we struck up a friendship. And she at the time lived pretty far away, like 10,000 miles away. So we just talked. I had no idea I would ever meet her in person. But we enjoyed talking. We connected on a very deep level and just deepened the relationship over time. And then about this time last year, she told me she was going to be coming to the United States. And so we met for the first time in July. Spent a week together. That was in Pennsylvania. Spent another 3 weeks together in my hometown. She came here and had to go back, but then eventually is returned, and she's here with me. And so this is just a really clear example of a gift that I never would have received had it not been for the work I've done with this podcast. And I just figured, since it's Valentine's Day, I'd mention that. We talked about doing an episode together and just sharing the whole story of how we met and how rooted it is in this podcast. But it's a little early for that. So in the meantime, I just wanted to share it here for Valentine's Day. So when I say there's lots of new stuff in my life, that's what I'm talking about. So it's the first committed relationship I've been in for years. And it's been an enormous growth experience. And again, just another gift of this podcast. So there's that. One more episode after this in season 1. And it kind of hit me over the weekend that this episode was going to come out on Valentine's Day, specifically because my birthday is a week after exactly. And I turned 50 a week from today. So I'm going to talk about that. I've written a piece about turning 50. I can't even believe I can get those words out of my mouth right now. So that's how I'm going to put a bow on season 1 of the podcast. So in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Dr. Bonci. Brilliant guy. And again, I want to say thank you to the folks at GIA Miami. GIA, it stands for Global Institute on Addictions. They abbreviated it to GIA. My friend Terry Shapiro is one of the principals there, and great guy. He's been on the podcast and has just become a valued, trusted friend over the years. And this wouldn't have been possible without him. So thank you, Terry. Thank you, Dr. Bonci, and everybody at GIA again. So here we go. Dr. Antonello Bonci. So I've been looking forward to you coming on the show to talk about your work. So if you meet someone out in the world who knows nothing about what you do, how do you explain your profession and your work to them? What do you tell them?
That's a beautiful question. So I usually tell them that I am a neurologist and that I studied the brain for the last 20 plus years. And what I did for this last 20 plus years mostly was to do research on how the brain works, and particularly how our brain works when we are stressed, or when we are depressed, or when we take alcohol, for example, or cocaine. But as a neurologist, because I was trained as a neurologist in Italy, where I practice when I go back, I also see patients. I see patients. Actually, I spend usually my weekends when I'm in Italy seeing patients, and I just try to help them. And the most important part in general of these conversations with my patients, but also with people here, is, and it amazes me every time, Tom, how eager everyone is, no matter what is their background or job, to learn more and to understand more on how the brain works. And that's what I try to do. I try to inform. I don't like to use the word educate sometimes, because to me it sounds like I'm up there and I'm trying to educate somebody, but to inform people in this confusion of internet where everybody writes everything without any quality check, to inform people on where science, technology, medicine is in 2022 when it comes to, for example, anxiety, post-COVID fatigue, or brain COVID, or depression, or addiction. So that's what I tell them. That's how I introduce myself usually.
And you've mentioned here a couple times. Here is Miami, right?
Here is Miami. I'm sorry.
No. It's okay. And tell them what you're doing in Miami. What year did you open GIA?
We opened it basically a couple of years ago, officially, like mid 2020. So it's been around in the full COVID pandemic, which was a struggle, for many of us, for our patients as well, because of the limitations of isolation and social distancing and so on. So, but a couple of years, a little bit less than a couple of years.
So I know you having worked in the addiction field. And so tell me about the work that you've done with TMS around addiction and its effectiveness, specifically with cocaine addiction.
All right. So this whole idea of using this non-invasive technology called transcranial magnetic stimulation started from a research article on a rodent model back in 2013, actually. This study was started at UCSF in San Francisco, where I was a professor in neurology, and was finished at the NIH in 2013. And the study basically shows that humans and rodents, when they take cocaine for long periods of time, have a frontal part of our brain called the frontal cortex, which is involved in decision-making, in behavioral inhibition, that is changed, it's altered. And some parts of this frontal cortex, our decision-making control center, is basically hypoactive. There were a lot of functional imaging studies from a lot of exceptional colleagues out there, and we did the rodent study and showed that, similar to people, even rodents, after a couple of months of exposure to cocaine, when they press a lever to get cocaine, they have a reduced activity in certain parts of their decision-making control center, of this frontal cortex. And what we did in rodents, we created a proof of concept. We stimulated this frontal cortex of rodents with a phenomenal technology that was invented at Stanford by colleagues such as Carl Diceroth, Feng Zhang, and Ed Boyden, for example, extraordinary scientists. And with this technology, we were able to re-stimulate, to reawake this hypoactive frontal cortex of rodents. And the extraordinary result was that when we returned on this frontal cortex in rodents, they basically, very quickly, within a matter of minutes, they lost interest in lever pressing for cocaine. So that was basically the starting point on how I learned about the potential of transcranial magnetic stimulation, because After that study was published, some of my collaborators in Europe put together a clinical trial to offer this idea, the same concept. What if we stimulate the frontal cortex of people who are struggling with cocaine addiction? Maybe they will lose somehow interest in cocaine. And this is how the whole story of using transcranial magnetic stimulation in cocaine addiction started. And we published with my collaborators those beautiful studies, and many other groups also published very similar work like we did, and the rest is history. So what we observed from the very first few patients in this clinical trial is that about 70% of patients had urine drug test negative, which is a very good sign that they didn't take cocaine anymore. And the most astonishing thing, Tom, was what the patients started telling us. They started saying, I am not dreaming of cocaine anymore. I am not craving cocaine anymore. I don't have the memory of the pleasure of cocaine anymore. I'm not interested in cocaine anymore. Even if I see signs, white mountains, or my friends are keeping on using cocaine around me, it doesn't touch me anymore. It doesn't move me, which I found it extraordinary. And that is how it all started. Now, it got expanded from cocaine for a very simple reason, that many of these patients also admitted that they used a lot of alcohol with cocaine. So it wasn't just pure cocaine addiction, but in many cases was alcohol and cocaine addiction. Some others had a pathological gambling addiction as well. Some others were taking or abusing benzodiazepines. So like oil, it expanded toward other addictions, and the results in our hands, in our clinics, were very, very similar to cocaine. And most importantly, because the patients are the most important centerpiece of the story, the patients said the same as they said the initial patients with cocaine. I don't crave alcohol anymore. I don't think constantly about alcohol anymore or gambling. Why was I doing something that silly, or why was I doing that before? So it almost sounded like this awakening, as if now the frontal cortex, this decision-making control center, was telling the patients again, this is what is best for you, and not the addiction anymore, speaking for them and convincing these patients that alcohol was the best thing for them, or cocaine, or gambling their salaries away, and so on. So it's still extraordinary. I've heard so many patients now in these last several years telling me this story on how they don't think about it anymore, how they don't crave it anymore, but it never gets old. Every time that a new patient who starts, our programs, including TMS, tells me, Doctor, now I don't think about it anymore. I don't want it anymore. It just gives me goosebumps. I never get used to that incredible feeling. So.
Well, and, we know addiction, a very strong component that is pretty universal when someone suffers with an addiction, is the obsession.
Correct.
Especially so with cocaine, right? I mean, it's that cocaine addiction is definitely characterized by an obsession.
Many addictions are. But yes, obsession is one of the kind of constantly thinking on how we can procure the drug, whether it's cocaine or alcohol, or how can we find a way to feed this addiction. It's part of the disease. And as you know, it's a disease like diabetes, hypertension, like many other diseases, and it has to be respected, taken it seriously like every disease, and not stigmatized like, unfortunately, usually addiction is. So Yeah, that's a very important point, Tom.
So you grew up in Italy, right?
Yes, as you may have never guessed from my accent, I'm not British.
No, not British.
I'm not. I apologize for my accent. It's just I couldn't
No,
fix it.
it's beautiful.
I tried for 23 years because I moved here in 1998 for good. I ran from Italy because I love United States and the meritocratic system. But my accent has not changed since the first day. I just can't. That brain region in my brain doesn't work, the no accent brain region. And anyway, what can we do?
Yeah. So are you a citizen of the United States?
Yes.
You are?
Yes.
So do you have dual citizenship?
Yes, I do.
Oh, lucky you.
Thank you. I love both countries, honestly. If I am here, I really crave going back to Italy after a while. And when I'm in Italy, I can't wait to come back to the United States. So typical.
What part of Italy are you from?
So my parents are from a tiny town of 30 people, which is called Casteldelci. Casteldelci means willow castle. And it's at the edge of Tuscany, Emilia-Romagna, and Marche. So right at the center of Italy. They grew up there. And I was born during the summer in a town called Riccione, which is on the coast. And they had a small hotel that they ran for many, many years. So I spent my winter in this tiny little town, Casteldelci, and my summers where my parents were working, and I was working with them as a waiter since I was a child in their hotel in Riccione. So summer boy on the beach, like a beach boy, and a mountain boy in winter. So I had both experiences. Yeah, very happy childhood. I'm an only child. I had amazing parents, just not parents that unfortunately had a chance to study because both of them had to stop. Like they have combined 8 years of elementary school, so they didn't get a chance to study because they were kind of the older sibling. My mom was the only female among 5 siblings, and even if she was probably the smartest and loved math and science, she just couldn't study. And back in the days, unfortunately, and even more recently in some countries, women were not meant to study. And she always regretted that. And my dad was the oldest of 7. He just started working when he was a kid, basically an adolescent, to support his family. So they both loved reading. They had a passion for literature, for music, for culture. And I felt it. I felt it at every step that they just wanted me to be whatever I wanted to. And I was very stubborn, so they couldn't move me from becoming a doctor because that's what I wanted to do, a physician. But they all they said is, Anto, we don't understand completely. You look like an alien to us sometimes. You're so complicated and so sophisticated sometimes in your passions. But, we're going to help you. We will help you. Just tell us what you need. And I felt completely supported by them at every step of the way, and up to medical school and my residency in neurology. And when I left them for United States, and they never made me feel, guilty, oh, you abandoned us or anything. They just said, Anto, you need to be yourself. You need to do what you need to do. And that's basically who my parents were. So very lucky, very lucky.
So how old were you when you knew you wanted to be a doctor?
I was about 12. I didn't know exactly what I was going to become because I was very fascinated in general by complex behaviors, anxiety, depression, addictions. Why do people act in certain ways? Decision making. Why do I decide, as I've done many times, to do something stupid? Why do I make mistakes, too many, or why do I do and I make the right choice? So I was about 12, And I thought initially that I was going to be a psychiatrist. But psychiatry, I'm talking about the early 90s, in Italy was mostly psychoanalysis. It wasn't, psychiatry wasn't as evolved as it was already in the United States with biological psychiatry. So I chose to become a neurologist because neurology was grounded on the anatomy, on the chemistry of our brain. But I always kept an eye on the other side, complex behaviors that pertain more to the psychiatry domain. So it was always in between the two, a neurologist in love with diseases that mostly belong to psychiatry, even if this distinction is not valid anymore, Tom, as you know, because it's all neurobiology and there's no such thing as a wall between them. So,
So 12 years old, you knew.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then, so you completed your schooling in Italy and then came to the United States. Is that right?
So during my residency, I had the first encounter with United States on the third year of residency. I was sent to learn some technology to record from single brain cells. This technology is called patch clamp to Portland, Oregon, to an amazing research institute called the Volume Institute. And my first mentor, Professor John Williams, was actually the first one that I met when I came to the United States. And he taught me a lot about this incredible technology and how to study in real time single brain cells in the emotional system, in parts of the emotional system called the limbic system, and see how the brain activity changes when we are stressed or addicted to cocaine or heroin or alcohol. So I learned this technology during my residency. Then I went back to Italy for about a year and a half. And then I had an opportunity to do a sabbatical with Professor Robert Malenka, who's now at Stanford, my second phenomenal mentor. And I was very lucky on the mentorship side as well. And with Rob, I worked at UCSF in his laboratory for about a year and a few months. And then UCSF had an opportunity for me to apply to an assistant professorship. And I applied. And I got this job as assistant professor. So since 1999, I was officially faculty at UCSF, and I was in San Francisco until 2010, and I had an amazing time at UCSF. I have a beautiful memory of San Francisco, my laboratory, my friends and colleagues there at work, just a beautiful experience. So very lucky.
And then where were you from San Francisco to Miami? How did you arrive in Miami?
So in 2010, I applied for this position at the NIH as the scientific director for the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And the scientific director's job is basically to run what is called the intramural program. And intramural programs at the NIH are basically research institutes. And this research institute, which was located actually in Baltimore inside one of the Johns Hopkins campuses, was actually the place where I published the study that had to do with developing this transcranial magnetic stimulation treatment. And those were another 9 years of my life where I was absolutely amazing. I learned a lot. I saw the side of academia. I saw the side of government. And I think that this very beautiful path prompted me to say, okay, Anto, now after 20 plus years that you've seen academy, amazing, you've seen working for the government, now it's time to work in the private sector. So I jumped on the other side, and I'm very glad that I did. And I'm keeping on learning something completely new at my age, which is important, to never stop and never be afraid of taking up new challenges. So that's the path. So 12 years San Francisco, 9 at the NIH in the Washington, D.C. area. and now a little bit more than a couple of years here in Miami. So that's the trajectory that I followed.
Well, so what are you excited about for your future?
Well, I am excited about my obsession that my moonshot told me that I hope that, I'm saying to 2030, I don't want to sound like a commercial, but by 2030, everybody, homeless, poor people, billionaires, everybody will have access to the knowledge that allows them to know that you can get better right now if you combine the knowledge from psychology, from technology, from brain stimulation, from medicine, from neurology, from psychiatry. So I would like everybody to be aware that they don't have to struggle because, as you may know, the statistics say that about 1 out of 7 Americans are aware of what the treatment options are for these conditions, anxiety, depression, addiction, for example. I just would like the number to change to 6 in 7 Americans. 7 out of 7 Americans know and feel empowered to be able to feel better and resolve these issues because they know that there are treatment options. And the other message, I keep on going back to this, is unite. Unite. I would never want patients to think that I had to choose. I either see a psychologist, or I either see a psychiatrist, or I use brain stimulation. But it's when you combine these phenomenal, powerful disciplines, including lifestyle, which is crucial, then you really achieve the best results. And there's no magic wand. TMS is not. Psychology alone is not. And we need to combine the power of psychology, technology, neurology, or psychiatry for each and every patient. And then, of course, with lifestyle, you see the most amazing results. So it gives everybody its due importance. And nothing alone, in terms of these approaches, can be as effective as the combination of them. And this has been seen for many times now. But I just would like everybody to know that and know that they deserve to get a combination of these approaches, whatever needed, to feel better, because they can.
Well, what you're talking about is sort of elemental to high quality addiction treatment as we've known it in the last 50 years. Being someone who I started my career with Hazelden, they sort of pioneered this model of multidisciplinary care where you're working with the entire person, mind, body, spirit. Back in the late 1940s, they weren't talking about technology, but they were, talking about the whole person and how that approach is really what's more effective than any other.
Yes.
You can heal the body. You can take the alcohol away. You can get the person through the acute withdrawal stage. But if you don't treat the mind and the spirit, then the cravings are going to exist and eventually the person's going to go back. But it's nice to hear someone in this time, things have changed so much in the addiction treatment industry during the course of my career that it's really refreshing to hear someone talk about this, how we need the collective to treat the person, and also that everyone deserves that type of care, because it's true.
And absolutely, Tom. And even if I understand nothing about numbers, because I'm not a business person, but if we made these comprehensive treatments available somehow to homeless, to anybody who needs them, even from a financial standpoint, I think that our society would save so many hours and days and years of workmanship lost because of people that cannot function and their families that suffer. So even from an economical point of view, it would make the most sense because a lot of us lose jobs because of depression, because of addictions, because of severe stress or anxiety or burnout. And the cost to society to actually offer these supports through insurances, through a very reasonable cost, I think would vastly outnumber the cost that society is paying now when too many people, because of anxiety, depression, addictions, and stress and PTSD, lose their job and they can't properly work. But again, it's very easy to talk. I have a motive. I want everybody to feel better, but it's a very complicated financial, the conversation. But it's just the treatments are there.
Right.
We have very powerful treatments now from all these disciplines, and it just pains me to see that the majority of our clients who come here and learn about TMS, I give them the tutorial about TMS, how it works, I show them the machine. They say, how come I've never heard of this?
Right.
And it's just sad because then I don't care if they come back, if they can afford it or if they don't want to come back. But at least they learn, they know that there is something more on top of whatever else is available that can really help them. So it's kind of sad to hear this over and over. Why have I never heard about this?
Well, one of the things I was curious about is how do the healthcare systems compare from Italy to the United States?
Italy is very different because everybody in Italy has free healthcare. So you have access to specialists, to general practitioners, to hospitals, to everything you need. So Italy is like many European countries, has free access. TMS is a very interesting example on how Italy is quicker than other places to catch it up. There are some regions I've heard just a few days ago, like Sicily or Veneto, who are thinking of offering free transcranial magnetic stimulation to many of their patients that are struggling with addictions, based on our data, my collaborators and I. So Italy has a public system, but is seeing already the potential of transcranial magnetic stimulation in being more diffuse in Italy as well, because again, there are some diseases that they call orphan diseases, such as cocaine addiction or gambling, where, as you know, there was no neurobiological treatment beside the power of psychology, which is wonderful, and therapy. So Italy, for example, is a little bit ahead on that, and it's thinking on top of all the other free services to also add transcranial magnetic stimulation, at least in these two regions, as far as I've heard. So it's very different environment. You don't accumulate debts in Italy because of you need to pay insurance bills. That doesn't happen in Italy. So it's much more people friendly from that point of view.
Humane.
Yes, correct.
Well, I want to thank you for your support of this show. First of all, I really appreciate collaborating with you, and I love having you on here. And
thank you, Tom. Same for me.
Yeah, and one of the questions that I ask of everyone is if there was a time in your life when you could go back and the younger version of yourself needed some support or advice, was having a tough time of it in life, when would that have been? What was going on? And what would you go back to say to the younger Anto?
Oh, God, that's a beautiful question. Yeah, in 2019, I went through a tough time because I was diagnosed by chance, actually, by a blood test that showed an anemia. I was diagnosed with colon cancer, and Thank God I was near Johns Hopkins. I had access to the best care in the world. I will always be grateful to Hopkins for having surgery there. They were incredible. But that was a very tough time because I was in that was the time where I had to make a decision whether I wanted to jump into this private sector and follow my lifetime dream of being independent from anything and anybody. And what I would tell myself back then is, Anto, never be afraid of doing the right thing. Fear should never hold us back. The best things that happened to me were usually out of desperation when I left Italy, because I was desperate. I couldn't find proper jobs there, and I'm glad I left Italy and I came to the United States. When I joined GIA as a partner, I was, very concerned about my life, my future, everything. And I jumped, terrified of jumping, but I jumped. And that was the best thing that I did. So never be afraid. Do never let your fears hold you back. And Tom, as for mistakes, God, I have a huge laundry list. As much as I think I am a smart person, I make mistakes on a daily basis. But for that, I accept myself. I am who I am. I make mistakes like everyone. I fall every day and I get up and I keep on going. And people pursuing my dream of offering knowledge and better treatments to everyone. And that is what keeps me going. And the stories that I hear from our patients here and in Italy, doctor, I cannot thank you enough. You changed my life, my family. And that is the best reward I get every single day, Tom. So most of all, I am a happy person. And I'm a very grateful person to be alive and to be here in 2022. Despite the craziness and the violence that we see on social media, in person, we see what's going on in Ukraine. I just think that kindness is always the answer, and it will just fight and destroy everything else, and it will prevail over violence at the end. So I believe that.
Well, I love all of that, because personally, one of the things I struggled with as a young person was overcoming those fears. And I had to take some lumps in life and get to the point where I was willing to walk through those fears and just do it anyway. Just do it anyway. And this podcast is definitely part of that story, because I couldn't have imagined myself sharing this much of myself continually as I do with this podcast. I couldn't have imagined that a few years ago. And it feels so much better to live this way, to not be dominated by the fear. And that's part of the reason why I chose this subject matter for the podcast, because just like everyone deserves the quality of care that you're talking about, I believe everyone deserves to be happy and to live in a way that makes them happy. And furthermore, the happier we are, the more effective we are, the more we contribute to society, the more good that we can do. And at the end of every episode, I just decided very early on that the last two words I would say at the end of every episode are "be nice." Because I agree with you about the kindness. And, I grew up in the Midwest of the United States and now live in West Palm Beach. And culturally, there are some differences. And it was something difficult for me to adjust to here in Florida for a long time because people aren't as friendly. They're not as inclined to say hello when they pass you on the street. And I grew resentful for a period of time about that. I didn't like it. And then I just decided, you know what? I don't care if they're friendly or not. I'm going to be friendly. I'm going to be friendly. I'm going to say hello. I'm going to offer to help the woman carry in her groceries or hold the door or whatever it is. And when I became intentional about that and focused on that, I started to notice a real difference in the quality of my life. And also I started to see the good in others. And when we're kind to them, they respond with kindness. Yeah. So we actually create our experience. It was a real tangible way for me to learn that. So I definitely agree that there is so much power in kindness. And it makes me really happy to have someone like you out there fighting this battle with me, you know, you have different weapons than I do, but you know, it's all the same fighting for people, you know?
Absolutely, Tom. And if you think about it, the most powerful weapon everywhere, think of Afghanistan, think of the United States, is education. Because what you do is identical. Honestly, I don't practice in the United States to what I do. People come here, I offer them a tea or a coffee, and I explain them. I educate them. I inform them about options. So you are doing this with your podcast. So at the end of the day, we set people free by giving them free knowledge. And we empower them. And that is the beginning of the end of every regime, as you see, you know, what's going on, like the example of Afghanistan. But knowledge is power. This is very obvious to say, but we do the same. We offer free knowledge to people, and there is many others like us doing that, and that is the way that, and nobody can stop us. So that's the most important part. But authenticity is also the other word that I really love, because being yourself, being authentic, not trying to sound perfect, not trying to be perfect. I can't. I struggled my entire life. I make mistakes on a daily basis. And when I speak with students, for example, that ask me or think that you and I ended up here and it was easy, I emphasize how much I struggled, how hard I had to study. I want to look real and authentic. I try, because life ain't easy for anybody.
No.
So I love the central theme of the podcast. Authenticity is the centerpiece, and it's a beautiful word.
Oh, thank you. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you. And thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
All right, there you go. Another episode in the books. Thanks for listening. You can learn more about the show and this episode's guest at thepathtooauthenticity.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Every little bit helps. I want to thank the band Punk Rock Opera, whose music you hear throughout the show. Their songs are used with permission from the artist and under a Creative Commons license. If you're so inclined, check out the Patreon community. As soon as I do these interviews, I upload them to Patreon, where the content is only available to patrons, and for just a couple bucks a month. I usually post audio content, their exclusive audio content, probably 8 times a month, if not more. And as these new episodes are released, as soon as they're done, they're available to patrons. So sometimes that might be 2 weeks before an episode is released, or even longer. Usually it's a few days. Anyway, if you want to support the show, that's a great way to do it. So thanks again for investing your time. It's a big deal to me. Thank you for supporting me and supporting the show. I hope you keep coming back. Be nice.
That's our story. I hope you enjoyed the punk rock opera. We have one last piece of music for you. It goes like this.
Okay, go. You cannot make us, we are the GIA Miami. Generation, self-made bands, we cut our teeth with bloody hands. The rage has instilled in us, can feed a crowd, give them a rush. Thank you. Good night.